If you like this video, make sure to visit our Vimeo page and follow us to get the latest update.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Suman here. Yes, this is the SAP HANA 2.0 training session. All right, so let's get started. Let me share my screen. So today what we are going to do is, in our previous discussion, that is in our yesterday's demo session, we quickly looked at what are the different things that we are going to cover as part of SAP HANA's course. We talked broadly about the different categories of information that we will be covering. I broadly categorized them as 6 different sections. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to get started with the first section, which is called the SAP Evolution, or I like to call it as the foundational building blocks. So let's start. So today is session 1. Hope everybody can see my screen, my whiteboard. If you can you please give me a yes on the window, just to make sure that everybody can see it? Perfect. All right. So today what we're going to do is, as part of, one second. As part of the first section, which is the foundational blocks, we are going to talk about the evolution of SAP. When I say SAP evolution, I'm going to give you an understanding of where did SAP start and what was the journey of SAP's different product portfolio, and how did we end up coming up to a product called as SAP HANA, and where we are today, and how the roadmap looks for the near future. So as I'm sure that many have heard the term SAP. SAP stands for Systems, Application, and Products in Data Processing. If you Google the term, this is the abbreviation. So SAP, that's what the naming convention stands for. But what we are going to be talking about is, so since we are starting off with SAP HANA, I'll first tell you, when SAP HANA started in 2010, the name HANA used to be an acronym. So HANA stands for, or stood for, High Performance Analytical Appliance. This used to be the acronym for SAP HANA. H, A-N, and A made it as SAP HANA, but we no longer use this as an acronym. SAP HANA has become so popular that it has just evolved into a product. It is no longer an acronym. Having said this, let's get an understanding of what SAP products were all about. Where did they start? What happened? And things like that. So to know that, you need to understand, let's go back maybe 3 decades and try to understand maybe 3-4 decades and understand how technology used to work in those days and how organizations were running their shops, right? So let's take a hypothetical scenario. Let's say that there is a company called XYZ. It's a car manufacturing company. It's a manufacturing company. Let's understand how things used to run in those days. I'm talking about the 1970s or 1960s. How the technology was enabling companies, big companies, to run their operations and what used to happen. So let's say that if I take any company, even today, it applies 4 decades ago. What we are talking about is, even though there could be several different departments within the organization, if I were to handpick a few very critical departments that helps run an organization, I can probably categorize them as, let's say, finance. Finance seems like an important part of any organization, right? Because at the end of the day, company wants to make money and manage their money. So finance is going to be a critical part of any organization. It could be a manufacturing industry, it could be an airline industry, it could be a hospitality industry, no matter what the industry is, finance is going to play a very critical role. Now that we are talking about a manufacturing company, I'm probably thinking that manufacturing is also going to play a significant role. Manufacturing team, the team which actually creates the product, right? They take the raw material and they convert it into a finished product. If there is going to be manufacturing, I am definitely going to have some kind of a sales team to help sell whatever has been manufactured by the company. So I'll say that there is also a sales department in the organization. And if I have finance team, if I have manufacturing team, and if I have sales team, I'm going to be employing people in all of these different departments. Then I probably need to manage the people also. So what's going to happen? I'm probably going to have a human resources department as well, because I have to make sure that the payroll is running, everybody is getting paid, and so on and so forth. So let's assume that these are probably some of the most critical departments an organization is going to have. Now let's take a quick scenario and understand what happens with this company on a day-to-day basis. Let's assume that this particular company has tied up with a vendor. There is some vendor who is providing some raw materials, because you need, for your manufacturing to start, you need some kind of raw material. The raw material is typically sent to your manufacturing plant. Let's say that this is your raw material. The vendor sends the manufacturing plant a set of raw material, and these manufacturing team, they go ahead and create the final product. Let's say in this case, the final product is a car. As soon as the manufacturing team creates the final product, taking the raw material and creates a final product, the manufacturing team lets the sales team know, we have created X amount of cars, go ahead and sell it to the customers. So the sales team, what they do, they reach out to different customers, and customers decide to buy the car. When they decide to buy the car, what happens is the transaction happens between the customer and the sales team, but the cash, the amount that is being paid, actually gets diverted to the finance team. So the dollar amount that a customer is paying is going to the finance team, and the finance team, what it does, it takes two sections. There is the revenue, that is the profit they made, and the expenses they have to cover. They take an amount of this money and they send it to the vendor, because if you remember, vendors were the ones who provided the raw material. So you have to pay them. So there is a dollar amount associated to pay with the vendor, and whatever revenue is generated gets trickled down to the entire department. So what happens? The revenue that has been generated gets sent to the human resource, because human resource has to start paying all the departments, because people are working. They have to start sending the information. Finance team has to provide the additional dollar amount to now invest in manufacturing more products within the company. So if you see that, there is a tightly integrated connection between all these different departments. They work hand in hand to create a product. So for creating this car, in this particular example, manufacturing team has to work with sales department has to work with finance department has to work with human resources department. This is what happens at a very, very high level in any organization. There is a tight integration that needs to be performed between different departments in an organization. Now, how did this integration happen? In those days, I'm talking about the 1960s and the 1970s. How did organization make sure that the communication between the finance department and the manufacturing department and sales and human resource was happening well? In those days, what used to happen is, let's assume that finance team used to run all their information through, just to give you a hypothetical example, right? They are running everything using a Java application. This is just a hypothetical. Maybe Java did not exist at that point, right? But just to give you a picture of what used to happen, all finance related information was maintained in a separate application. Let's assume it was Java. All manufacturing related information let's say, was supported by another application. Let's assume that was .NET application, all manufacturing, all sales probably was being supported by, let's assume, some CRM application. I'm just giving you examples of the idea behind what I'm explaining here is each department acted as silo or individual organization, and they were running their own applications. And let's say human resources was running it through, let's assume, PeopleSoft or some application. Now, if each of the department was containing its own application and they were running individually, imagine in those days, how did the interaction happen? If something happened in my finance team, how does the finance team know the data from finance has now been fed to manufacturing? The data from finance has been fed to sales, and the data from information has been gone to, because now these are all individual applications. In those days, you had to manually make the integration or the interaction between these systems. So what was becoming a big challenge is integration. How do I effectively send the information from a finance application to my manufacturing application, and from manufacturing to human resource and sales, and vice versa? So integration between the systems within an organization was an extremely big challenge. So this was one of the challenge. The second challenge was, were they able to confirm that whatever information has been shared between these applications were still accurate? Because one technology is talking to another technology, there is high possibility that when the data transfers from one application to the other, there is a possibility for data corruption. A data can get missed, it can fall through the cracks when it is moving from one application to the other, or it can even get misinterpreted. So there is whole possibility of data inaccuracy, right? So when you look at it, the common challenge that was happening in those days was that there is no integration, proper integration, and there is no data accuracy. So imagine organizations, what used to happen is, this is what the biggest challenge was. So at that point of time in 1972, 5 IBM employees, when they were working on all these big projects, they understood that, hey, there is a big challenge that's happening with an organization where I'm not able to integrate information coming from one department to the other. If you look at it, they said, this is nothing but for an entire enterprise. There are resources being allocated for finance, there is resources being allocated for sales, there is resources being allocated for human resources. How do I effectively plan and combine them in a proper manner? And that is how the term coin, enterprise resource planning came into play. So they looked at this problem holistically, and they understood that integrating or making all these different parts of your enterprise work together, there is a big challenge. So that is how the terminology called as enterprise resource planning came into picture. So now what it means is, you see that the enterprise is nothing but your XYZ organization. The different resources are nothing but your different technologies that are supporting the different parts of your organization. And how do I effectively integrate or plan or bring them together to work like a machine? So that is how this term called as ERP, enterprise resource planning. The acronym for that is ERP. That's how they came up with this terminology. So when these 5 IBM employees looked at this as an opportunity, they said that, okay, we are going to start our own company and maybe start helping with ERP solutions. So in the market, 2 major companies evolved. 2 companies came into existence to support enterprise resource planning as a solution. The first company is SAP, and the other company is Oracle. So I'm sure that people are familiar with these 2 different products. These were the only two ERP systems or companies that can support ERP as a solution. But the approach taken by SAP and Oracle was a slightly little different. If you look at Oracle, Oracle said, okay, this being the problem, if you look at this organization structure here, if I were to pick out of these 4 different departments, let's say finance, manufacturing, sales, and human resource, if I were to pick one particular functionality or one particular department that is more critical than anything else, and they identified that finance seems to be the heart and soul of any organization, they said, because we think finance is very, very critical, we are going to create an ERP solution which is going to focus on financial aspect of any organization. So what happens is, whether there is different departments, there is sales, there is human resource, there is manufacturing, so on and so forth. Oracle said, what I'm going to do is, I am going to be focused on how each of the different departments within the organization are feeding data into my finance department. Their focus was how data gets fed into the finance department from different departments. Their focus was mainly on maintaining how effectively I can keep track of my other departments integrating with finance department. So they focused mainly on what happens, what is going out of my finance team and what is coming into my finance department. That was becoming the main focus of Oracle system. So that's why you would hear the term Oracle Financials. The ERP system created by Oracle is called as Oracle Financial because they created a niche product which is mainly focused on looking at how the financial data is being managed. On the contrary, SAP took a more generic look at the ERP solution. They said, I understand that finance is a very critical part of the organization, but so are the other departments within the organization. I'm not going to just focus on one particular product. I'm going to be focused on integrating the entire departments within the organization. So they created a product which broadly focuses on 3 major subsections of an organization. So they said, obviously, I'm going to focus on finance because finance is very critical. I'm also going to broadly look at logistics. So if I say finance, finance can contain accounts payable, accounts receivable, general ledger, investment management, so on and so forth, that could contain many sub information about finance. Logistics on the same way can have sales and distribution, can have material management, can have production planning, can have plant maintenance. And then finally, they have human resources. So the ERP solution created by SAP broadly categorized its system into 3 major buckets. It said, I can support anything to do with finance. I can support anything to do with logistics. I can support anything to do with human resources. If you look at human resources, payroll, time and administration, budget, and so on and so forth. So what SAP did is they went and created a product which is much more broader in perspective and it can be applied to any organization. Oracle Financials, on the other end, though it is a very good product, it started only focusing on finance as an option. They said, I am not going to care about what is happening internally within sales. I'm not going to focus on what's going to happen internally within your human resources. I don't care about your how you hire people, how you fire people, how you plan for your next hires for the next year, and so on and so forth. As long as there is a financial aspect associated with it, and it's going to make a difference in your finance department, I'm going to only focus on that aspect of your organization. So when you look at these 2 broad categories of ERP solution, naturally you can see that the reach of SAP is much significant than where Oracle would be right? If you look at the market share, SAP now typically has about 70 to 70% of the world market when it comes to ERP solution. And it used to be 70-30, but this 30 is now being shared by many other companies. There are now many other softwares, ERP softwares that are available that are competing. But you can see that SAP is still the market leader when it comes to providing enterprise resource planning solution. So I'll take a quick pause here. Does this information make sense? The reason I'm talking about this is you need to understand where did SAP even start and what was the reasoning for it to start, right? You hope everybody can appreciate where it all originated. All right. So perfect. So excellent. So with this information being available, now let's look at the product evolution of SAP. So now we can understand that SAP as a company started in 1972 by 5 ex-IBM employees. They started this company called SAP, and they started, what was the first product they brought into the market? It's called SAP ERP. See, the term ERP became only lately available. It was not when they brought this company made this company called SAP. They did not have this naming convention called as enterprise resource planning. Even though that is what the concept is, they did not know to call it ERP at that point. So the product that they've developed, the very first product that SAP company came or brought into the market to solve this enterprise resource planning issue is called SAP R1. That was the very first product from about 1972 to 1978 or so. This is the product that was being sold in the market by these 5 employees, ex-employees of IBM, who started this company called as SAP. So what is this naming convention? What R1 stands for? So one of the challenges when we looked at, what are the 2 challenges that we looked at when having to run any enterprise resource planning in an organization? One is integration and data accuracy, right? So they saw that integration is very critical, and especially when you have departments like finance, sales, manufacturing, human resources. One is you have to make sure the integration between these departments is intact, and preferably it is live or real time, which means that if something happens in the finance department, it doesn't make sense for the sales department to know it 3 days later. You need to know it almost right away so that sales can make an information, a sound decision based on that information, right? Would everybody agree? So not only integration and accuracy is important, that real-time integration is critical for the organization to be able to provide value add both to the company itself and to its customer. So the naming convention R1, R stands for real-time integration. They understood what the problem was with the companies at that time, and they created this product and said the naming convention was R means it is real-time integration, and 1, at that it tells me how many layers does this application have. This product called as SAP ERP or the R1 system, how many layers does it have? 1 refers to it's a 1 tier or 1 layer architecture. Now, what is a 1 layer architecture? If you go back in time, if you're familiar with what used to happen in those days in the 1960s and the 1970s, everything was being run by a single box called as mainframe. Everything was run on a mainframe system. So this one box is the 1 layer. Your SAP system or application was run inside a 1 layer box called as mainframe. Because it was supported inside a 1 layer system called mainframe, the term was referred to as 1 tier architecture. So it is being supported by 1 tier called as mainframe. Inside that mainframe box is where the SAP application used to run in those days. And in those days, mainframe was very popular. That was the only possible solution available. So everybody went with this particular route. But slowly people started realizing that mainframe was becoming more and more obsolete, and they wanted to get rid of that technology, and people wanted to move with more updated and latest and greatest versions of SAP system. So what happened? SAP also started evolving. By around 1978 till about 1990 or so, they moved into the next generation ERP system, which is called R2. Again, R stands for real time. Now the 2 here means that it's a 2-tier or 2-layer architecture. So what were the 2 layers that was supporting this is, we got rid of the mainframe and we went into a server architecture, server-based system. So now what happened is, one of the layer was, they created a separate layer for storing your database. All the data will reside inside this database, and you will have an application layer where this is where the software is going to, software which is nothing but your SAP software is going to reside. Now they moved from a mainframe system to a server-based architecture. Layer 1 is your database layer. Layer 2 is your application layer. So that's why it is called, it was called a 2-tier architecture. But the problem here is, even though it is better than your mainframe, you moved from an older technology to a newer technology. The issue is, just looking at this picture, if you look at it, even though my application and my database are 2 separate objects, if my server goes down, it's shut down, or there is a power outage or something happens to the server, can either one of the application or the database survive? Can they still be up and running? If you see, if you think about it, right? If the server itself is down, can the underlying application and database be supported at that time? No, right? Because if the main box itself is switched off, the application and the database also will get switched off along with that option. So that was the disadvantage with this particular approach. Even though 2-tier architecture is better than the old obsolete mainframe technology, there was still opportunity for SAP to grow and evolve its product. So in the 1990s and going forward, SAP went with the next evolution of technology, which is R3. R again for real-time integration. 3 is the 3-tier architecture. The 3 tiers of the architectures were, or it's still applicable now, they created a separate box for a database independent of itself. This is where all your data is stored in tables. You have a separate box which contains an application layer. This is where your software, your SAP software, is going to be residing. And you have a client to access the system. So they can integrate with each other, but they are individual boxes, which means that if something goes wrong with my database layer, the application is still running. The only problem is it cannot probably store data inside your database, but people can still, if they are going to be doing reporting on this system, they can continue to do it, and vice versa. So this is the first layer, this is the second layer, and this is the third layer. The third layer, this is called client server architecture. Client in our current world, if you want to relate this to some information, think of this as your, let's say you want to access your Gmail email account, right? Gmail is a software. So imagine that your Gmail is residing in the application layer. whatever emails that you have within your Gmail software are data. So they are going to be, the emails are going to be stored in a database that is in a separate database system. But to access your Gmail account, do you go to, yeah, let's assume that this particular server, the application and the database for the Google Gmail product is probably in some part of California, let's assume. Every time to access your Gmail, are you going to go take a flight to California, go look at the server and understand what my emails are? Or do you simply use a web browser and get connected to this system? This system can exist anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter. As long as you have a web browser and you have internet connection, you just connect to that application and you're able to access your email. Does that make sense for everybody? So this is what the client server architecture is, and this is the current architecture that SAP uses. So SAP currently goes with all the products that it has created so far are now based on this 3-tier architecture, client server architecture. It has 3 layers. The client layer. So the application can reside in, let's say, India. The database can reside in Japan, for example. It doesn't matter. For me as a user, all I need is a browser or a client. I can connect to the application which is in India. I can connect to the database and pass the data to that database which is residing in Japan. So that is what is called a client server architecture. So SAP said once they got to this R3 architecture, they said this is perfectly fine. This is the correct architecture that we want to use. And going forward, even though the naming convention kept changing from R1 to R2 to R3, it eventually became SAP ERP, which is Enterprise Resource Planning. And now it has become S4 HANA. So you might ask me, what does this 4 mean here? It's nothing but because if you look at the naming convention, the first product started with a 1, the second product went to a 2-layer architecture, went to a 3-layer architecture. Even though the latest product is in a 3-tier architecture, because they have evolved the product to a next level, they gave it the naming convention 4. The architecture is still the same. It is still a 3-tier architecture because now it is a different ERP solution than what used to be in the past. That's why they have given it a naming convention as S4. Okay. So that is how the product numbering also evolved in the market. All right. I'll pause here quick. Is the information good so far for everybody? Are we understanding how the product evolved within SAP and why did the naming convention came into existence as R1, R2, R3 and into S4 eventually? Well, if that is clear for everyone, let's now understand the details of that product evolution. So let's take SAP product evolution. Just naming it from R1 to R2 to R3 is not going to make a big difference. What we need is to understand where did they start, what was the issue with the product, and what did they do to make it better and evolve into a next product. So let's try to broadly categorize the SAP evolution into 3 major sections of eras. So I will say the first is beginning from 1972 to, let's say, 1980s, or I can even say 1980s till about late 1980s. We will say this is one of the era. The next era is let's say 1919 to early 2000 and 2000 going forward. If I can broadly categorize SAP's evolution in these 3 different periods of time, let's understand what happened. So we all now understand SAP went and created this product. If I were to generally coin them, an ERP solution, right? What is this ERP solution? This ERP solution broadly was supporting information about 3 major functionalities within any organization. One is finance, logistics, and human resources. These are the three major functionalities that was being supported by SAP, right? So when SAP came up with this ERP solution, for each of this, let's assume that let's call these as modules. It's a finance module, it's a logistics module, and it's a human resource module. Each module had sub applications within them. So there was an application that was supporting accounts payable, because accounts payable within a finance department, if you're not familiar with the financial terms, accounts payable is nothing but anything to do with expenses. For a company, if I have to pay rent for somebody, if I have to pay money for buying raw materials, any money that I am spending to keeping the organization running, those are expenses. All your expenses are going to be tracked in something called as accounts payable. That's where all within your finance module, a sub part of your finance module is called accounts payable, which keeps track of all your expenses. Then you have accounts receivable, all revenue related information, all the profits I make, all the uh, uh, benefits I am making, all anything that is to do with profit and revenue is going to be tracked with your accounts receivable. The general accounting information is going to be maintained within your general ledger. So there are several. So when SAP created this product called SAP ERP, the finance module contains several such small applications within them. Similarly, logistics focused on sales and distribution. How do I sell a product and how do I send it out? How do I distribute that to the different customers within the company's portfolio? And that they came up with material management. How do I take raw material and convert it into a final product? The complete life cycle of a material management, from raw material, how does it go to a finished product? How do I maintain the plant to do the manufacturing? If I were to convert a raw material to finished product, I need to establish a plant or a factory which can help me automate the process of moving from raw material to finished product. And so there were several sub applications within this logistics module. And similarly, within human resources as well, you will see that there was payroll, because I need to pay the people working within the organization. I need to make sure that I'm capturing the vacation and uh, time management. How many people are checking in at what time, checking out at what time? All that information needs to be kept. And budget, I need to plan for next year's expenses also. So if you look at it, when the SAP ERP solution was created, these were some of the different applications that was being supported by the organization. Now, just think about it very simply. In those days, what was the main reason to maintain this particular system? Would it be fair to say, I want to know as an organization at any point, I want to know what is happening within the finance team, what is happening within the logistics team, and what is happening within my human resources team. So if I were to oversimplify, at the end of the day, what was the benefit of having an ERP solution for an organization is for me to know day-to-day reporting. Would everybody agree with me? So what I'm saying about day-to-day reporting is, today I want to know how much money did I have at the start of the day. After selling how many products, how much money do I have left, so that I can plan for my tomorrow. If you look at it, this can also be considered as operational reporting. Nothing fancy about this reporting. I want to know how much money did I start with, how much money did I end up at the end of the day. Do I have enough money to run tomorrow or maybe day after tomorrow as well? The focus in those time, 1970s to 1980s, was mainly focused on how can I run my day-to-day operation. In order to run my day-to-day operation, what information would I need from my finance team, what information would I need from my logistics team, and from my human resources team. It was very narrow focused, and it was serving a purpose. Because if you also remember, we are talking of before pre-internet era. People, if I had a company called XYZ in, let's say, in Detroit, Michigan, my competitor probably is going to be another company in the same neighborhood, maybe within Detroit or maybe within Michigan for the most part of it, right? Most of my competition is going to be my neighbors. I'm going to compete with them. So in order to compete with an organization, all I need is to know basic information about my day-to-day operations. That was sufficient enough at that point to run a healthy company. If I knew how much capital I had for tomorrow, I can probably beat my neighboring company and know how to get the market allocation in a better way. That was the main focus then. So what was not available at that point, if I were to, let's say no analytical reporting concept was available. What I mean by analytical reporting is there was no focus on, can I plan for the next 6 months? Can I plan for the next year? Can I do forecasting? Can I do trend analysis? These concepts were not available at that point of time. The idea of doing more than a day-to-day operational informational reporting, there was no need for me to go over and beyond and look at information beyond that. But that started slowly changing when we moved on to the next era, which is 1990s. What happened? We moved into something called as the globalization era. We are talking now, internet had started. Companies were not just competing with their next door neighbors. Now the competition became much more worldwide. A company in US could be competing with a company in China or with a company in India. And now it became even more difficult for you to do competition. So in order to now survive in this internet era, it was not just sufficient for you to know your basic operational reporting. Please understand, it was still critical for you to know the day-to-day reporting. How to run your organization on a day-to-day basis is still critical. But what I'm just mentioning is, because now the competition or the market competition has become worldwide, if you cannot survive just with your operational reporting, you needed to know much more analytical and advanced capabilities about this reporting. So this particular ERP system is only able to provide you this day-to-day operation. So the question is, SAP said, I understand SAP ERP has its specific focus. It is helping me with operational reporting, but for me to compete in this new market, which is the globalization market, what additional softwares can I start bringing to complement my current operational reporting system, which is the ERP system? So in those terms, SAP said that one thing that is missing is a capability to do advanced reporting. I want to be able to go look at the data much more detail and start doing some forecasting, doing some predicting and all those things. So I can be better prepared to compete with my next door neighbors plus my neighbors from across the world. So they created 16 new products. I'm not going to list all the 16 products, but I'm just giving you an idea that 16 new products were created to complement the SAP ERP solution. The most critical ones are, the first one is called SAP BW, Business Warehouse. Business Warehouse is nothing but it is a data warehousing system if I were to simplify it, it will take all the data, not only today's data, but let's say 5 years of worth of data from your SAP system, and you put it inside your business warehouse. So think of it as a large scale database. It takes all the data from your SAP ERP system and holds historical information. Now imagine if I have 5 years worth of information sitting in this business warehouse. Can I say, I'm going to take one particular example. I will say, I'm going to look at the last five summer season, and understand what was happening within the organization for that last 5 years summer. What kind of product was being sold? Maybe if I'm selling a car, if I'm a car manufacturing company, if you go look at what was happening in the last 5 years during the summer season, more and more convertible cars were selling in the market, because the rooftop can go down, you can actually enjoy the summer. So now that I have historical information available within my business warehouse, can I now start predicting what's going to happen for this summer? It's a possibility, right? Now I'm open to that idea of starting to explore the data and say I can start predicting. Maybe when I get close to this summer, I stop reducing manufacturing the regular cars and start focusing on manufacturing more of convertibles, knowing that there is a market for convertibles during the summer season. Now I'm doing forecasting. I'm planning for what's going to happen in this summer. Does that make sense for everybody? This is the SAP strategy. This is how they started evolving, right? They understood their operational reporting supported by the ERP system is very critical. But to be able to be better prepared to work in the globalization market, they are adding a newer technology called as SAP Business Warehouse, which helps you tackle this one challenge that you have, which is analytical reporting. Similarly, in those 16 new products that was created, I'll name a couple more products. In the olden days, let's say in the 1970s and 1980s, when you think about sales, when I'm doing a sales to a customer, I am only focused on, okay, how can I reach out to a customer and sell the product? As soon as I sell the product to a customer, the cycle is complete. In those days, do you think that they would have called the customer every week to know how the product was doing? And is there anything they could do to help serve the customer better? No, those days, that was not the concept, right? A sale is nothing but you interact with your customer, you get the sale done, and then you move on to the other customer. That was okay in the 1970s and 1980s. But with the globalization era, with the market being so fierce and the competition being so fierce, if you did not have continuous interaction with your customer, so essentially basically talking about customer service, it became very difficult to retain a customer. A customer would jump from one organization to other if they come to know that there is better service being provided by another organization. So what happened when the logistics in the 1970s and 1980s was focused only on sales and distribution? The sales and distribution now got further divided into three main categories. One is selling was not so simple as just picking up a phone and calling a few customers within Michigan in this case, and calling them and saying, hey, you know what, I have a great product, I want to sell it to you. You have to, the sales cycle itself got broadly categorized into three subdivisions. One is called pre-sales, that is marketing. You have to first market your product. How can you become competitive and better than your competitors who are not just your neighbors but across the globe? Once you do pre-sales, which is marketing, you do the actual sales. So actual sales is very similar to what you used to do in the previous era. But once you have completed your sales, your job doesn't stop there. You have to do post-sales, which is customer service. So SAP understood that just having a logistics team and doing sales and distribution and tracking that alone is not sufficient. You have to now start tracking pre-sales, sales, and post-sales. So in order to perform these three operations, SAP came up with one of the 16 new products was called SAP CRM, which is Customer Relationship Management. So customer relationship management, think of it as an advanced capability of your logistics, sales and distribution. So sales and distribution is basic functionality. You're complementing it with additional capabilities called customer relationship management, which takes care of pre-sales and post-sales capability. All right. So similarly, if you take material management was focused on mainly how to convert raw material to finished product. It did not worry about how you are dealing with your vendors. How can I get competitive vendors? Because in those days, you were only focused on, if you knew a vendor, you probably stayed with that vendor forever. Even though the cost price was extremely exorbitant, because you had that relationship, you would have continued to work with that vendor for a long time. But in the competition, in the new globalization market, you are now open to vendors from across the world. So you could actually, your supplier or your vendor, you could effectively manage that. You can go to the best bidder, you can go to the best provider, and you can pick them and choose them to improve your profit gap. So old era, it was focused on just material management. The advanced capability of that was called as SAP SRM, Supplier Relationship Management. So just like this, so many other products for plant maintenance, there was an additional product called as complementing product called as APO was created, called Advanced Planning Optimizer. How do I efficiently manage my plant maintenance? So this is how several of the 16 products got created. I just highlighted a couple of them: business warehouse, BW, CRM, customer relationship management, SRM, supplier relationship management, APO, advanced planning optimizer. Some of these advanced tools came into the market to complement and supplement the current operating reporting solution, which is your ERP system. Having looked at this, though we identified a challenge from the old era, we created several new products to support and complement it so that you could eliminate some of the challenges that were presented in the 1970s and 1980s. But with the new technologies evolving every day, SAP started feeling the pinch that there were some challenges even in the globalization era. So here, what happened is, one of the challenges that they saw was, they realized, okay, now I'm capable of supporting my ERP to an advanced level because I have a business warehouse system, I have a CRM system, I have an SRM system and an APO system. I'm well placed within the market. But even though the problem of analytical reporting was solved by creating a new product called business warehouse, it's okay to store all these 5 years of data in a powerful data warehouse. But at this point, SAP by itself did not have a set of reporting tools that can present this information in a better way. The type of tools that SAP was dependent on was like Excel based and things like that. Very rudimentary, or it had to go to another company's reporting tool. It had to rely on, so if an organization bought SAP products, for the reporting, they still needed to go out of SAP and go to a third-party reporting tool and get those reporting tools to run the reports. So the reporting or the visualization capability was lagging within SAP platform. So if you were to come out of this globalization era and figure out what was the one big challenge that SAP had, SAP did not have a reporting tool platform within the SAP portfolio. So that is how they evolved and started moving into this 2000s. In the 2000s, one of the challenge was SAP said, I think we are well placed to support both ERP and the advanced components that they had created. But one big challenge they had was they did not have a reporting platform within SAP. So at this point, SAP and IBM were out in the market. This is, I'm talking in the 2005-2006 timeframe. They were out in the market trying to acquire their own reporting companies. So there were two big reporting products or companies that were in the market. One is called Business Objects, a very popular reporting tool. And there is also another called Cognos. These were two reporting platforms or companies that were widely being used across many organizations. No matter whether they used an SAP ERP solution or an Oracle ERP solution, at the end of the day, the reporting information was visualized either using a business objects reporting tool or a Cognos reporting tool. So SAP and IBM were in the market to acquire a reporting company. SAP went ahead and acquired business objects. IBM went and acquired Cognos. So in 2006, SAP acquired business object and it became called as SAP business object. So by acquiring SAP business objects, SAP was able to add a portfolio of reporting tools. To name a few: web intelligence, designer, which is no longer used. There are many tools: Designer Studio, analysis for Office, for OLAP. There were several products that were available within the business objects list of reporting tools. All these reporting tools were acquired by SAP. So now all this information, whether it is operational reporting or whether it is analytical reporting, all those could be visualized using one of these tools. Now, so they were looking at challenges that were available in their current platform, and they started building additional components to complement it, right? Similarly, if you look at it, as we talked about the SAP ERP system, what was the architecture it was built on? Can anybody help me? Was it an R1, R2, or R3 architecture they finally landed with? Can anybody help me out? What was the final architecture on which SAP landed? It was R3, right? Perfect. So there is a client, there is an application. Here is where your SAP application resides, right? It could be an ERP application. It could be your business warehouse application. It could be your CRM application. It could be your SRM application or your APO. Any software stays in this layer. And then you have your database layer. For a very long time, now you can see that SAP has now added many portfolio to the application layer. Would you everybody agree? They have brought so many different components, right? There is ERP system now, there is business warehouse, there is customer relationship management, supplier relationship management, all these. They have added a list of application to their existing portfolio. But when it came to the database layer in your 3-tier architecture, SAP had no presence when it came to a database. So no matter what, SAP could, when it goes to an organization, it could give you a list of applications. But when the organization had to support it with an underlying database, SAP did not have any database of its own. So they always had to be supported by a SQL server or by an Oracle or by a Teradata system or an IBM DB2. Companies always had to go for an third-party database to support your SAP application. So looking at this, SAP understood that there is a potential for us to grow in the database market. Now I don't have complete monopoly over this portfolio. I am only a leader at the application layer. So even though I am really superior in the application layer, Imagine this, right? I'll give you an analogy just to put things in perspective. I might have a great Ferrari body for the car. The body of the car could be of a Ferrari, but the speed of the car is still going to be controlled by the engine that you have, right? What if you had a Toyota or a Honda engine inside a Ferrari body? It is still only going to perform as fast as the engine underneath that car. Would everybody agree? So similarly, in this analogy, if you look at it, even though my SAP application layer, which is corresponding to the Ferrari body, the sleek looking, the most elegant application, it is only as good as its underlying database. If the underlying database is slow and it is not powerful enough, your application layer can only perform so well as your underlying database. So they understood that SAP, even though the application portfolio is really big and really amazing, I am not able to perform at my full capacity until I am dependent on some third-party database. And if you look at all these third-party database, they are all traditional RDBMS system. What does that mean? RDBMS stands for Relational Database Management System. That's the traditional name of any system. So they looked at this as an opportunity and they said, what is a traditional RDBMS system? Just to give you a perspective of what we are talking. Let's assume that you have a laptop or a desktop. You know that your laptop has, let's assume that your laptop has some configuration. Let's assume that it has a 1 terabyte hard disk. And let's assume that it has a 4 GB RAM. So what happens every time a user is trying to access some information from your hard disk? Your hard disk is nothing but a disk, right? It's a mechanical device. So every time I'm going to ask for an information, the information gets passed to your hard disk. The hard disk typically, because it's a mechanical device, it is limited, right? If you remember, hard disk running speed as measured typically in like 3200 RPM and so on and so forth. RPM stands for rotation per minute. So in order to fetch information that you're asking from your computer, the information is passed down to your hard disk to search the information within your hard disk. Hard disk rotates at a certain rotation per minute. It has to rotate. The mechanical device has to rotate. And then after it finds out, it sends the information back to your screen. Is everybody comfortable with this information? So that's how a typical hard disk works, right? Because it is a mechanical device. Anytime you ask for some information, when you're searching for a file or when you're looking for something, when you ask for that information, it has to go look into your hard disk, which is a mechanical device. It has to rotate. It has to churn. It has to figure out where the data is, and then it brings back to your information. Once you have brought back your information, if it is something that is very commonly searched by you, your computer also has something called as a main memory. What happens is in your browser, you have something called as a cache, right? Most commonly searched things are cached in your browser. Similarly, if you're looking for a file very, very often, what happens is the computer also has something called as a main memory, which is a small section, but it's all memory. It's not hard device. It's not a mechanical device. It's a memory, just like your flash drive, your pen drive, which contains your information. So to retrieve information from your flash drive or from your pen drive is much faster if you all understand it. So anything that is cached is going to be staying in your main memory. And the next time you search for that, it will take it from the main memory and give it to you right away, rather than asking your hard disk to churn and figure out that information. So this is how a typical computer works. Now, SAP looked at this as an opportunity and said, all traditional databases like your SQL Server, your Oracle, your IBM DB2 runs their databases like a traditional hard disk. So think that SQL Server, Oracle, and IBM DB2 are running on mechanical devices. When you send data, let's say I have an SAP application, let's say SAP ERP, it is sending data to one of these traditional databases. To store the information, it has to churn and store the data. To retrieve the information that I'm asking from the ERP system, it has to churn the data and send it back. So can you see the analogy that there is a definite limitation with SAP system application being supported by a traditional database? Can everybody give me a yes or no if you can understand the potential limitation that a traditional database had to support with your SAP application? So you can understand it, right? You are limited by that mechanical capability of your database. Correct. So when I say product, I'm talking about the software, the ERP, the application layer, the business warehouse, and so on and so forth. Okay. So SAP looked at this and said, I am being limited by my traditional database. If you look at it, there is this small area where it's called the main memory or your RAM. Whatever data was stored in my memory, I was able to retrieve it extremely fast. Why not have a database that is completely running on a main memory rather than a traditional disk-based database? Imagine if this entire 1 terabyte database, instead of sitting in a disk, if it was sitting, all of it was sitting in main memory. Imagine your entire organization's data was being cached in a memory. Then how quick would you be able to retrieve that information? Would it be much, much faster than your traditional databases, or would it be the same? What would you think? If the entire organization's data could now be possibly located in your main memory or in your memory, then the data retrieval becomes extremely faster. So the software can be now well supported by a main memory database. Much faster, right? So they identified the challenges that was available in the market, and they came up, one of the biggest accomplishments they had in the 2000 era was, after acquiring the reporting tools, they looked at the possibility or opportunity to come up with a database solution, and they came up with a product called as SAP HANA. HANA is a in-memory database. Now, can everybody understand and appreciate why a HANA system is called an in-memory database? There is no traditional mechanical device that is storing your SAP system, SAP data. The entire database. So what happened? They said, I no longer to support an SAP application, whether it is ERP, whether it is BW, whether it is CRM, whether it is SRM, so on and so forth. To support any of this application, I no longer needed the traditional database like the SQL Server or Oracle or whatever it is. They said, instead, we have created our own product called SAP HANA, which is storing everything in memory. So now any of these applications can start running using a HANA application, HANA database. So what is the benefit out of it? You are no longer dependent on third-party vendor company for database support. SAP now has its own platform for database, And that is how SAP HANA came into the market. Does that make sense for everybody? By a show of yes or no, please. See, this is how SAP product evolved when you look at it from the 1970s to today's date. This is how the SAP market came into existence. Now, now that you have an understanding of where we started and where we are right now, this is how the platform has evolved. So in our next session, we will go into Rafael has a question. Can you repeat? So if you look at the whole scenario, right, Rafael, if you looked at this particular evolution of the product, you will see that we started with an ERP solution and we understood the challenges, brought in new products to the market. Again, when you brought the new products, you understood what, so in the old era, it was the operational reporting, no analytical reporting. In the next modern, in the globalization era, you were able to bring advanced reporting, but you did not have a good visualization. You brought the good visualization, you found out there was no proper database to support it. We moved on to SAP HANA as a product. And then once SAP HANA was created, SAP HANA, now if you look at the roadmap, if I were to draw a line graph with time in it, right? Let's say 2010, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018, 2020 going forward. SAP HANA as a database came into the market in 2010. Now, think about it and tell me, there could be several hundred or thousand organizations that were using SAP application. It could be an ERP application, BW application, CRM, so on and so forth. They could have been using this application being currently supported by a traditional database like Oracle or SQL Server. Do you think it would have been viable for SAP to go into the market and say, hey, you know what? I go to a company like GE or Pepsi or some big company which has been running their SAP applications with some traditional databases for a very long time. I go to them and say, hey, you know what? We have come up with a new database. It is extremely powerful. Why don't you go? I know that your company is running SAP ERP on a SQL Server database. Why don't you go ahead and scrap your SQL Server and replace it with HANA? Do you think if SAP had taken this approach, going bold out in the market and saying that now that I have a powerful database, go ahead and scrap whatever underlying database you had for your SAP application, replace it with HANA. Do you think any organization, any big organizations would have accepted that as a proposal? Nobody, right? Because nobody knows the track record for SAP HANA as a product, as a database. So what was the best way for SAP to penetrate the market with SAP HANA? What they did was they they realized that companies which was running an SAP ERP or SAP BW or SAP CRM, in which system do you think the SAP BW or SAP CRM or SAP ERP? Let's take it this way. So if this is run by Oracle, if this is run by SQL Server, and this is run by IBM DB2, I cannot go ask them to replace all this with HANA. So what SAP did was, as a small prototype challenge, they went to organizations and said, I know your ERP system has finance, logistics, and human resource modules, right? And each one of these has several applications like accounts payable, accounts receivable, general ledger, and so on and so forth. Let's do one thing. Right next to your SAP system, that is your SAP ERP being supported by Oracle, I will stand a simple HANA system on the side. I will bring a SAP HANA system on the side. All I ask of you is give me one critical application within your SAP team, SAP system, on which there is a lot of demand for reporting, but you're not able to satisfy that reporting because it's taking a lot of time because it's being supported by Oracle. Give me just one application from your module. We will take that data, put it into the SAP HANA system, and we will run reporting on top of it. And we'll show you the capability of what SAP HANA can do. So in this case, SAP HANA acted as a secondary database. What is the primary database still for the ERP system? It is still, let's assume that in this case, it's Oracle. I am using the HANA as a side system. Is everybody understanding the concept? So they stood as SAP HANA system on the side of your SAP system as a standalone SAP HANA database, passed one application's data to that database and started reporting on top of it. So by doing that, they wanted to show the capability of HANA database, the in-memory database, how fast it can help you with reporting. And that is how SAP HANA penetrated the market. So the way they penetrated the market was by something called as sidecar approach. SAP HANA acting as a secondary database to help solve a particular problem. This is how SAP HANA got its foot into the market. Once companies started using it as a sidecar, a small system on the side to help show the improvements, performance improvement for reporting. Yes, the application is very powerful, right? Because it is now complemented with so many other applications, ERP, CRM, BW, and so on and so forth. The application is very powerful. It's very sleek and very powerful and very efficient. But if it doesn't have the similar power in its underlying database, it's going to be limited by that capability, right? That was the main problem. Now, by sending the application data, the ERP data into the app, let's say accounts payable data into HANA, and by showing that I can run the report much, much powerful. Imagine in the 1990s, it was okay for me to run a report and the report will run overnight for like several hours. And by the morning time, when I wake up, when I go to the office, the report data will be ready. That was an acceptable option. In the current market, can I ask a user, a business user, to run a report and wait for 5 minutes to get the result? Nobody is going to accept that, right? If you look at the current technology, the state of art of technology, if I ask my users to run a report and wait for half an hour or 5 minutes or even a minute, it's too much to ask. Everybody wants the data instantaneously. So imagine, even though my SAP ERP system is capable of generating reports at a lightning speed, but it can only bring data from an underlying database that is traditional in nature, I'm limited. My report cannot run faster. But imagine if all my data was sitting inside an in-memory system, the time taken to generate the report is going to be lightning speed. So that is how SAP HANA came into the market. To show its worth, it started off using a sidecar approach. Once the sidecar approach became popular, SAP said, the organization started realizing that worth of SAP HANA, but they were still hesitant because there were not many organizations which had said, I am now so comfortable with HANA, go ahead and replace ERP system is the crux of your organization, right? That's where every information about your organization is stored. You don't want to jump the gun and replace it with an HANA system. HANA, even though it has showed promises, companies were not ready to make that plunge and say, okay, I'm going to replace my database that is supporting the most primary critical application, which is ERP, and replace it with a HANA system. So what happened? Between 2010 and 2012, companies started saying that there is this BW system. BW system is more of an advanced reporting system. It's not the main ERP system, right? Whatever data is there in the ERP is taken into BW for for more of advanced reporting. It's not the source of truth. That's not where your transactions are being stored. It's only an additional system that is helping you with advanced reporting. They said BW is less critical in nature when it compared to ERP. I am comfortable with the sidecar approach. Why don't we take HANA to the next level? Company said we will go into SAP BW and run it on HANA. So company started looking at SAP BW, which is being run by another database. And they said, we are comfortable. We will go ahead and start migrating all our BW systems, which are running on a traditional database, into HANA. That's how the market started. Slowly, SAP BW running on HANA became popular. People became more comfortable. They said, now I will run SAP CRM on HANA, SAP APO on HANA, SAP SRM on HANA. And as and when more and more companies started running their not primary but supporting applications, SAP said, now it is time for us to make the plunge and say, we can also start running SAP ERP on HANA. So between 2012 and 2014, 2015, you would see that companies started moving their SAP applications to be running on SAP HANA. As SAP was doing more and more research and development on this HANA database, they realized the potential of SAP HANA. And they said, we are running now. It used to be that SAP application was the Ferrari body and the database was a very old engine, right? Now what has happened is the table has turned. The database has now become the Ferrari. And I'm still running the SAP application. Now it's probably looking more like a Lexus or something like that. I now have the opportunity to upgrade my application layer. With the capacity I see with the underlying HANA database, now I have the potential to improve the application layer. And they said, I'm going to fundamentally rewrite the ERP application. ERP was created with traditional database supporting it. That was the mindset, right? When the applications were created in the 1970s till the 2000 era, if you look at it, it was primarily created with the fact that it was being supported by a traditional database. But with the invention of SAP HANA database, now they realize that the application layer can be even more made sophisticated to be working hand in hand with this great product called as SAP HANA. So they rewrote the SAP ERP application, and that became S4 HANA. This is an ERP created by SAP only to be able to run on SAP HANA. It is designed exclusively to run on HANA. So you cannot take a new S4 system, the new ERP system, and you cannot make it run on any traditional database. It will not work on anything else. It will only work on HANA database. So that is how. So you would see, if you have been following the roadmap, SAP came up with something called as Simple Finance. They first took the finance aspect of SAP ERP and they upgraded it to work on S4. They saw the potential, people started accepting it. Then they moved into S4 HANA. Since, let's say, 2015, S4 HANA has been creating new releases. And now we are at S4 HANA. The latest version is 2020, last year's release. So that's where S4 or the HANA portfolio is going toward. Does that make sense for everybody? By a quick show of yes or no. So this is how the product evolved within the SAP portfolio. So for today, I will stop it right here. So now at the end of this today's session, you have gone through how ERP as a concept evolved? And then how did SAP take the opportunity of solving this ERP problem? And how did they come up with a company? How did they start off with an ERP solution? How did they evolve? And then we looked at the three major time period, the 1970s to 1980s, and then the 1990s to 2000 and 2000 going forward. We saw how the product evolved, what were the capabilities, and then what was the challenges, how to solve those challenges, did they come up with new products, and then what were the new challenges they faced, and we saw how things evolved. So there is a question from Vijayata. What are the challenges storing the data in memory and how SAP overcome it? Correct. So that is where, if you remember Vijayata from our yesterday's discussion, now the next topic that we are going to talk about are the 4 questions. What, or I should even say, give me 1 second. The why. Is everybody now understanding why we came into this product called as SAP HANA? I'm hoping that you have now clarity on how the product evolved and how did we land up into a product called as SAP HANA. So we have seen why SAP HANA came into the market. The next question is, what is the technology behind SAP HANA? When I talk about the technology behind SAP HANA, Vijayata, I will go over the advantages and I will also talk about what are some of the limitations, and in order to solve those limitations, what additional products were added within this HANA platform. So when we talk in the next session, we will go into that what question, and that will help you answer the challenges that we have currently with the SAP HANA system and how they were overcome. And then once you learn this what, which gives you a high level information on what are the different technologies, I will take you into the details of how these technologies works with each other. And then we talked about the when, now, the roadmap. I will go into the details of the roadmap also and talk about deployment strategies. So in the next week, we will be talking about I will reiterate why concept with another example, so it becomes much more clear for you. And then we will be spending more time on this what, how, and when. And on Sunday, the next Sunday, so next Saturday, we will be covering this information. And on Sunday, we will complete talking about the deployment strategies, which is talking about on-premise, cloud, and hybrid option. And I will also take you into the system and start showing you how to access the HANA system through HANA Studio and the web IDE. All right. This is what I'll be teaching in the next session. All right. So this is all I wanted to cover for today. Hope the information was good for everybody.
Thank you for attending the session. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to visit our Vimeo page and follow for more upcoming videos.